Good day, class, and welcome to this lecture of this Introduction to Criminal Justice course. I am Professor Darrell Ouellette, and this will be Lecture 9. In Lecture 9, I will be talking about family and crisis intervention and dealing with emotionally distressed individuals. Police officers, although they may not always realize it, use psychology daily in their interactions with people in the community. Because police officers deal primarily with people who have problems, they must try to develop and utilize observation and communication skills in order to perform their job effectively and efficiently. In this lecture, I will talk about family and crisis intervention, and I will also lecture on such topics as police response to domestic violence, police response to sexual assaults, police response to despondent individuals. By despondent individuals, I mean people who are possibly suicidal persons. Despondent individuals can also be barricaded individuals or individuals suffering from mental disorders. This particular lecture will also fall under the section of crimes investigated and suspects arrested. Also, as an introduction to this lecture, I would like to say that police officers frequently find themselves playing the role of psychologist and mental health counselor. Many police officers do not view intervening with mentally distressed persons as a police duty. Nevertheless, police officers are expected to assist with emotionally distressed individuals because of their potential for violence and their frequent disturbance of social order and peace. Police officers frequently come in contact with individuals who exhibit a wide range of mental and emotional problems. In each case, police officers are expected to make judgments and satisfactorily resolve the problem so that the public's safety, as well as the safety of the distressed individual, is assured. Such decisions and actions can be difficult and complex tasks, particularly when police officers are expected to resolve the problem successfully without adequate training or benefit of information regarding that individual's mental health history. Because it's difficult for most officers to recognize mentally distressed and emotionally unbalanced individuals all the time, it is important for them to receive as much training as feasible concerning the handling of emotional problems. Whether the police like it or not, they are the only immediate authority for helping mentally distressed and emotionally unstable individuals. Police intervention in such disputes places the officers in the dual role of enforcer, and also the officer becomes a helping agent. While most police officers have had training as enforcement agents, few have the training or skill that adequately prepares them as helping agents in family disputes. Domestic violence is a very common type of complaint or crime that police respond to involving distressed individuals. Domestic violence is usually a complaint involving assaults or threats between family members or individuals living together. Domestic violence laws include such crimes as assaults, threats, harassment, criminal restraint, kidnapping, compulsion, and stalking. Assaults can also include the crime of rape, such as sexual assaults. Threats include attempting to place or placing another in fear of bodily injury through any course of conduct such as threats, harassment, or tormenting behavior. What does compulsion mean? Well, compulsion means that you are compelling a person by force, threat of force, or intimidation to engage in conduct from which the person has a right or privilege to abstain from. Kidnapping or criminal restraint sometimes becomes part of domestic violence. That involves restricting the movements of another person without that person's consent, or removing that person from their residence, place of business, or school. We know that kidnapping often results in abducting someone. Criminal restraint comes into effect when you restrict the movements of someone. You may not necessarily remove them from the home or out of the city or state. If you're restricting their movements, that's criminal restraint. That's against the law. The crime of stalking involves the act of following an individual or being in the vicinity of their home, school, or place of business on a frequent basis. This is not just a one-time deal. It's doing it on a frequent basis. It's not continuous. But if you constantly show up, you want to follow an individual around because for any reason, and you show up at their place of business, or you follow them home, or watch their home, or you follow them to school, or whatever, that is considered stalking. Domestic violence laws protect family or household members. They protect spouses or former spouses. They protect individuals presently or formerly living together as sexual partners or domestic partners. They also protect gays and lesbians because they are possibly sexual partners or domestic partners. The law enforcement policy on domestic violence is this. Police are required, and also they vow, to complete a thorough and comprehensive investigation and prosecute domestic abuse crimes no matter how frequent. Police also vow to protect and provide maximum protection for victims by reducing the abuser's access and providing support through a combination of law enforcement, judicial, medical, victim advocate groups, and community services. Police also vow to identify the primary aggressor and make an arrest when authorized by state law as a preferred response, instead of using dispute mediation, separation, or other police intervention techniques. When I first became a police officer in 1977, there weren't any domestic violence laws on the books. As police officers, we would show up to family fights, even if one of the parties had been assaulted. Unless the crime occurred in your presence, you could not arrest. We would issue a summons, and then we would separate the parties, take one person out of the home to go sleep it off for the night, to go to the other end of town, whatever. But we would separate the individuals. We would identify the primary aggressor and summons them for assault. Under today's laws, even if the assault is a misdemeanor, we can now arrest even though it did not occur in our presence. As you know, misdemeanors need to occur in your presence in order to make a physical arrest, but domestic violence laws are excluded from that. Even though they may be misdemeanors not occurring in your presence, you can arrest for such crimes. Police also vow to ensure that officers responding to a domestic violence crime will be sensitive to the emotional trauma experienced by the victims. Police usually follow a three-phase approach to intervention in family disputes. I've asked you to read the handout listed under handouts in this course titled Police Intervention in Family Disputes. The handout is information put together by 3 psychologists. The most well-known psychologist is an individual by the name of Reiser. There were 2 other psychologists that agreed with his three-phase approach. One was named Gilliland, Gilliland, and the other one was James, James. I apologize, I don't have their first names, but you can call them Dr. Reiser, Dr. Gilliland, and Dr. James. All 3 individuals suggested a three-phase approach to dealing with family disputes. The first phase is called the initial intervention phase. The second phase is diffusing and assessment. The third phase will be resolution and referral. I'd like to look at each of these phases as they police intervene in family disputes, how each phase pertains to the police intervention. Not only will I discuss each phase listed on the handout, but I will also actually define for you how police respond and how investigations are conducted. The first phase of police intervention and domestic violence response is the initial intervention. Due to the severity and volatility of domestic violence and the fact that domestic violence sometimes results in death, it is recommended that 2 officers respond to such complaints. The role of the police dispatcher is critical in obtaining as much information as possible from the complainant prior to the officer's arrival. The first question that the dispatcher should ask after the name and address of the individual is whether or not anyone at that residence is injured. Now, with automated dispatch, with the 911 dispatch capability of today, usually whenever a call is placed into a 911 center, the person's name and address of the owner of that phone, it comes over on the screen, but it may be someone else who's placing the call. So after name and address is recorded, the question should be asked, is anyone injured? Once that is addressed and help is called upon, like the dispatcher may place a call to a paramedic to also respond with the police. In addition to that pertinent information, names, nature of the complaint, location, callback number should be made, an effort should be made to get this information and relay that to the responding officer. The dispatcher should also ask if the suspect is present, and if not, the suspect's description and possible whereabouts. So while police are responding to this complaint of a domestic dispute, if a crime has been committed and the suspect is no longer at that location, getting a description and possible whereabouts will help in finding that individual, so that police can also interview that individual as to his involvement in the domestic violence. If the offender is mobile, that meaning that the person is left in a vehicle, the dispatcher should get a description of the vehicle involved. The dispatcher should also ask whether there are weapons involved, how many, and if possible, their description. That would be important information for police officers to know prior to responding. The dispatcher should also note the sobriety status of the alleged offender. If the suspect is there or has left, the sobriety status of that offender should be noted. Sometimes intoxicated individuals are more difficult to deal with. The dispatcher should also inquire whether children are present at the scene, and again, do they need medical services. The dispatcher should also inquire from the victim if they have a current protective or restraining order on the suspect. Now, oftentimes when we put in the victim's name or we put in the suspect's name, we are now, police or law enforcement is now computerized to the point where if a victim goes into a court to get a protective, restraining order or a protective order, that when the dispatcher types in the victim's name, that will automatically show up on the screen, on the 911 screen. The same with a suspect. If you type in the suspect's name, if there's a restraining order against that suspect, that will show up on the screen. The our automated dispatch will also give us a complaint history of any calls to that reported location. Now, the importance of knowing whether or not there's a restraining order on a suspect, that's important because domestic violence laws require an automatic arrest of a suspect if he's violating a restraining order. So upon arrival, that suspect is with the plaintiff or the victim who applied for the restraining order. That is a mandatory arrest under Maine law or most states in this nation. The dispatcher should try to keep the caller on the telephone as long as practical. The dispatcher should give the caller a time estimate of the officer's arrival. The dispatcher should not cancel the officer's response to a domestic complaint if the caller requests the cancellation. Oftentimes, the caller will change their mind about pressing charges or whatever. The police should continue anyway to make sure that everything is all right and to ensure the safety of all parties concerned. Upon arrival of police officers to the domestic violence complaint, They should restore order by gaining control of the situation. They should take control of all weapons used or threatened to be used. And they should assess the need for medical attention themselves. Now let's move on to the second phase. This is the diffusing and assessment phase, phase 2. When police arrive at a domestic violence complaint, they should separate individuals for interviews and statements, particularly if the individuals are the ones that are, you have a suspect and you have a victim, the ones that are involved in some type of altercation. By separating them, you're protecting the victim and you're also getting individual statements from each of them. Using 2 officers again is the best method. One officer interviews the victim, the other officer interviews the suspect, and then the 2 officers get together and confer with one another whether an arrest should be made or whether other actions should be taken. The final stage is the resolution and referral stage. I'll refer to this as phase 3. This final phase can include an arrest if evidence supports that a crime was committed. Mandatory arrests occur in cases where there's been a court order that's been violated, and also in cases where you have aggravated assault. An aggravated assault has taken place. Now, an aggravated assault is a life-threatening assault where someone has been physically assaulted to the point where their life, they may lose their life. That's an aggravated assault, life-threatening injury. Again, it's always recommended that police officers make a physical arrest no matter what. But in cases of a court order being violated or an aggravated assault, the arrest is mandatory. In the resolution and referral phase, police can also make a referral to an advocacy group such as victim advocates and shelters, Hope and Justice projects, battered women's projects. Different places have different names for such advocates. Police can also make referrals to such advocacy groups as alcohol, drug treatment programs. Police also advocate for victims to seek a restraining or protection order from the abuser. Now, I mentioned that Maine has a statewide database for entry of protection orders. Such notices of protection orders also come into effect when an officer simply stops, makes a motor vehicle stop, and runs the operator's name or possibly the name of passengers within the vehicle. Sometimes we come across violation of court orders if individuals are together when the court order says that they can't be together. Victim and suspect may have reconciliated, and we come across that quite often. Just a simple motor vehicle stop for a taillight out or speeding. We find the suspect with the victim, and there's a court order in place. The police are mandated at that point to also arrest, even though there's no domestic violence going on. Now, after the 3 phases are completed, Police also have a responsibility to do a follow-up. Once a determination has been made to arrest a suspect, police need to collect evidence of the crime. Evidence includes things like statements of victims and witnesses. Evidence will include observation of the officers at the scene, what the officers noticed at the scene, things like overturned furniture, broken windows, flower pots left on their sides, on the tipped over, a coffee table possibly tipped over or broken. These are all signs of a violent act having taken place. Police should take color photos of the scene and also injuries of the victim. A follow-up visit with the victim should be done within 72 hours for several reasons. One is if the victim has any bruises, the bruises may have been red when the initial call was placed, but 72 hours later, that bruise has now turned blue and green or yellow, depending on the healing process, and those bruises show up much better on color photos. Also, a follow-up visit with the victim within 72 hours will let the officer know whether a suspect has violated a court order, if the victim has gotten a court order or a restraining order. If the victim has not gotten a restraining order, then the officer has another opportunity to talk to the victim about obtaining one. I'd like to talk for a moment now about sexual assaults. Police officers often have more experience with rape victims and their families than do mental health professionals. We have usually have more contact with victims than any mental health professional. Since most investigating police officers are male, their gender alone may serve as a barrier to open communication unless care is taken to develop an open and receptive atmosphere for the victim. In reading the slide, when responding to calls of sexual assault, police should be responsive to the victim's needs, to include their emotional and medical needs, and show compassion. Police must also be constantly aware of crime scene security and be aware that sexual assault victims are a mobile crime scene as well. If you get a call from a rape victim that is reporting a rape, police must give specific instructions to that rape victim so that victim will not destroy any physical evidence. Oftentimes, rape victims, as soon as they've been raped, or as soon as the assault is over, a lot of victims feel very dirty and they want to take a shower. They want to change their clothes. Some of them even throw their clothes in the washer. They possibly strip the bed if the rape occurred on bed sheets. So police must give specific instructions to the victim that they are a crime scene themselves and they should not bathe, shower, wash their clothes, remove their clothes. They should not eat anything. Just the act of eating will destroy possible evidence within the victim's mouth, such as pubic hair, seminal fluid. Eating or drinking could destroy that. So police give specific instructions to the victim. They also ask the victim to not go back into a crime scene where the rape occurred. Let's say if a rape occurred in a bedroom, to not allow anyone to disturb the bed. if a victim was raped in a car, in their own car, that is also a crime scene. There are usually three possible scenes in a rape case. Oftentimes, the victim herself is a scene. The place where the rape occurred is a scene, and sometimes in cases involving a date rape, the suspect will transport the victim to another location after the rape has occurred. So the vehicle can be a crime scene as well. It may be a place where the rape occurred, or it may have been used to just transport the victim. Police will make arrangements to immediately transport sexual assault victims to a hospital emergency room for treatment of their injuries and collection of possible evidence. Once at the hospital, the victim will be examined by a SANE nurse, a sexual assault nurse examiner, SANE. SANE nurses are trained to process evidence from rape victims. They will immediately have the victim disrobe. Each garment of the victim will be placed in separate paper bags so that transfer of evidence does not occur from one garment to the next. The victim will then be examined to collect evidence off the victim. There will be vaginal swabs taken of the victim. There will be mouth swabs, oral swabs taken as well. The victim's head hair will be plucked to compare with possible hairs found on a suspect. The victim's pubic hair from the vaginal area will be collected and placed in separate envelopes. The victim's fingernails will be clipped. Those will be also placed in a separate envelope. And it's a long process, and nurse examiners are trained in collecting evidence for the police. Once the sexual assault victim has been completely examined, the nurse will collect all the separate paper envelopes. They'll collect a sample of the blood. They'll collect a sample of urine. They'll collect all the clothes in separate bags and package everything into one big box and turn it over to the law enforcement officer so that the officer can take the clothing to a crime lab for examination. The victim is then interviewed again after the examination. The officer does an initial examination upon meeting the victim. They'll do a more complete interview of the victim after the exam, and sometimes another interview the day after, because most often rape victims are very traumatized initially, and they will remember more 24 hours later. Constant contact with the victim is important in a sexual assault investigation so that you can assess the victim's needs, assess how the victim is doing, and also possibly collect more information. The investigation of sexual assault on this slide mentions that the officer should know the elements of the crime. When you're investigating an assault, you should know what elements are needed to prove that particular crime. In the crime of rape, elements include such things as the victim not given consent, or the possibility of there has to be some sort of coercion where the victim was not consenting and the suspect somehow was able to get the victim to comply, either through coercion, which means the threat of physical force, some sort of threat using a weapon possibly, or the threat that the rapist will harm the victim's family in some way. So threat of force, threat of blackmail, threat of some sort of harm to the victim or their family is part of coercion. In an investigation of sexual assault, the officer should do thorough interviews of victims, witnesses, and suspects. The officer should also do a thorough processing of the crime scene and collection of evidence. In closing, this will be the last slide in this lecture. I'd like to talk about police response to despondent individuals. Police officers, when responding to despondent individuals, that is, individuals with mental disorders or individuals who may be barricaded and threatening suicide or threatening to harm someone else, or police officers dealing with individuals under the influence of drugs or alcohol. Whenever police officers respond to such cases, they should explain to the individual that what they're going to do before they do it. Police officers should not lie to emotionally or mentally distressed individuals, or talk as if the person in distress cannot possibly understand the situation. When dealing with these types of individuals, police should at least attempt to communicate with the individual as if they were a relatively rational, normal person. The police officer should avoid threatening gestures, verbal abuse, or physical force, except in extreme cases. Usually, emotionally distressed individuals are compliant and agreeable if they are given assurance that the police officer is a friend who will help them rather than threaten the individual's already uncertain stability. Mentally unstable individuals such as potential suicides, hostage takers, or snipers are particularly dangerous. A police officer's main concern in such cases should be the safety of others and him or herself. If the police officer is convinced that prompt action is necessary to protect the interests of the emotionally or mentally distressed individual and others, then force may be required to stop the situation. Police response may include use of force. That's always a difficult decision when responding to situations where despondent individuals are breaking the law. If someone is suffering from a mental disorder, again, try to be their friend, try to communicate with them, or try to find someone who the person with the mental disorder trusts, a family member, a caretaker of some type. In dealing with suicidal individuals, again, try to communicate. You need to talk them into not committing suicide. Here, police do not use family members. Police use negotiators, or they communicate with the individual themselves without using family members, for the simple reason that the person may be attempting suicide because of what a family member has done to them. The family member, the person may be going through a divorce. The person's children may have denounced them. The family may have abandoned him or her. And so police do not use family members or any other individuals, best friends or whatever. The best friend may be having an affair with the individual's wife. So police frown from doing this. They perform these types of they try to negotiate with a suicidal individual to not go ahead with the act. Oftentimes the public will criticize the actions of police and how they deal with suicidal individuals. If a person is about to commit suicide, sometimes police will be able to disarm the individual in some way, either through the use of beanbags or some type of non-lethal force, using a chemical mace or using a taser, using a baton to strike the individual so that he does not complete the act of suicide. That use of force is perfectly all right under law, but it is not all right to use deadly force against a suicidal individual. Shooting someone in the knee or wounding someone by use of deadly force is not acceptable. Oftentimes suicidal victims become barricaded. Sometimes they have a hostage. Sometimes they are barricaded and they've created a standoff with police. In closing, I've included a video of a standoff that I was involved in 1990, where I disguised myself as a cable TV repairman. An individual had been barricaded for 24 hours in his home. He was alone, no hostages, but he had threatened suicide because his wife had left him. He had also lost a son through a childhood disease. Son had died at an early age, and the individual, this male, was very despondent over the loss of his son, the loss of his wife, and was threatening suicide. The neighbors were concerned about this individual. They called the police. When the police responded, he drove them away by threatening to shoot them with a gun. The police sealed off the street. They evacuated the neighborhood. And for 24 hours, they tried to negotiate with this individual. And it wasn't until the individual gave them a possible opening that I came into the picture. The individual was trying to tidy up his financial affairs, and besides leaving a suicide note, and leaving his will out for the family members to see, he'd also had paid for a electronic part for his TV cable box. It was a filter that he had ordered through the cable TV company, and the company had not come to install this electronic device yet. So he called them, wanted to know, he had paid for the part, wanted to know where the part was. And the cable TV company, this was in the city of Presque Isle in northern Maine, the cable TV company recognized who this individual was because there was extensive media coverage of this whole event. As I mentioned a few minutes ago, the police had sealed off the streets, evacuated the neighborhood. Hostage negotiator several negotiators had been on the phone with this guy, including myself, very briefly, and he would hang up. And so when the cable company called to say that this guy had placed a call to them for this cable part, we had the cable company call the man back and told them that they would be sending a serviceman over to install the part. And at this point, I got a crash course in installing such a filter. I put on a cable TV uniform. I used their van I pulled right up to the front door of this residence. Now this individual was becoming extremely intoxicated, and apparently it didn't dawn on him that that the streets were blocked off and that this cable van was able to go through the roadblock to install his cable box filter. You'll see from the video that I was successful in subduing this individual and taking him to a mental facility to be treated. He was armed with a gun, and that was put away when I knocked on the door, but he did greet me with a knife in his hand, and I had two officers hiding in the van in case things went really bad, but fortunately they did not. Felt very good about what I had done that day. It was one of those extreme maneuvers where it was a last resort. We had tried to negotiate with this guy, and it looked like he was getting close to the end. So it was a risky move on my part, but I felt that I could safely go in there, disarm the man, and bring this case to a successful resolution. Anyway, the video follows on the next slide. If you're unable to open it on the next slide, then go to click on the video icon in this course and select barricaded I believe the name of it is Real Stories of the Highway Patrol Barricaded Individuals. That's the name of the video. The reason it's called Real Stories of the Highway Patrol is because back in the 90s, early 2000, there was a program on TV that aired many such activities of police, and I was called to recreate this barricaded felon situation. They used me as the actor. So view the video. It's about 7 minutes long. I apologize for the bad acting in the video. I play myself, and as I said, things turned out pretty well. I was awarded the special award for bravery from this incident, and my reward was saving the life of this individual. Again, if the video does not show up after this slide, go to the video icon, and you should be able to open it up there. Have a good day.
Our next story concerns heroism at the greatest degree. Maine State Police Sergeant Darrell Ouellette is involved in a desperate situation when a man with a gun puts himself and his neighbors in harm's way. Trooper Ouellette appears as himself in our reenactment.
I, Mark Stephen Price, do leave everything I own to my good friend, Mike L.
Mark Price has been on a drinking binge for 3 days. Estranged from his wife, he's still despondent over the death of his son a few years ago. Now he's planning to commit suicide. Alerted by a neighbor who is worried about Price, the Presque Isle Police Department sent Sergeant Naldo Gagne and Officer Brenton Sensi to investigate.
Get out of here! Go on! Get out of here! Put the gun down. Put the gun down. Get out of here! Put the gun down. Get out of here!
01 Presque Isle. Officer needs assistance, 24 School Street. Subject has a gun. It's been nearly 20 hours since an armed man first barricaded himself inside his home. Police say he's threatening suicide. They tried talking him up, but so far have been unsuccessful.
Presque Isle officers surround the man's house. Neighbors are evacuated, and an observation post is set up next door. Maine State Police Sergeant Darrell Ouellette is dropping off some reports at the end of his shift. After 13 years on the force, he has just been promoted from detective in the drug unit.
Every time we think we're getting some progress,
we'll do everything we can to help you.
Officer Ernest Campbell talks to the despondent man as police wait for a break.
You're not going to get me to change my mind, and I'll kill anybody that comes near me.
Now begin.
Paragon Cable. Paragon. Listen, this is Mark Price.
he's been up about 30 hours
Excuse
now.
me, Chief.
Yeah,
Chief?
hold on a second. Yeah, Tom?
Cable company's got Price on the line. He wants them to come over and put a powder on their TV.
You're kidding me. We got a break here. Hold on just a second. Tommy, this is what I want you to do. I want you to tell the cable company to send a man and a truck over here right now.
Will do.
Mark Price knows the local police officers, so Sergeant Ouellette is called in to work undercover, disguised as a cable installer. Ouellette goes to Price's house. Backing him up are a state police detective and a Presque Isle police sergeant.
Okay, guys, we're almost to the house. You better get down.
Okay.
Hey, guys, I'm going in. Okay, buddy.
What do you want?
I'm the repairman. You called for a filter so you can watch wrestling.
A trooper in disguise up against a man with a knife when we come back.
Get out of here! Get out of here!
A man threatening suicide barricades himself in his house. When efforts to save him fail, Maine State Police Sergeant Darrell Ouellette tries to get into the house, disguised as a cable TV repairman.
What do you want?
I'm the repairman. You called for a filter so you can watch wrestling.
You got it?
Yeah, I got it right here.
Oh, well, put it on the ground over there and get the hell out of here.
Oh, that's all right. Why don't you just open the door and I'll come in and install it? Free of charge.
No.
Look, how do I know who you are? You got some ID?
Just a minute.
Officer, get down! Get down!
Get out of the ground! Get out of the ground!
Give me your other arm! Okay,
The man was held under observation for 96 hours. No charges were filed. He is since divorced and returned to the community.
I was a little scared. Basically, not worried about what was going to happen to me. I was more worried about something did go wrong. Thought about my kids, thought about my wife. If I didn't come home for supper that night, how they were going to be taken care of. I was very vulnerable. He could have picked me off at any time if he chose to do so. I could see that this person was very despondent. I was able to read the suicide note, and I saw the shrine to his dead son, and I realized that I wasn't really dealing with a criminal here. I was dealing with somebody who had some real problems, and I had done something good.
Darrell Ouellette received the Maine State Police citation for meritorious service. He is now a lieutenant in the criminal division.